A whole. It's Wednesday, November 6th, and I call the meeting to order. Our first order of business is to approve the agenda. Can I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The agenda is approved. Next will be approval of the minutes from our September 18th, 2019 meeting. Is there a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay. Are there any changes? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved as well. We have two information items tonight on the agenda. First one is going to be a presentation by the Younger Leaders Design Studio at the Citizens League, and we are going to hand this off to Pahua Hoffman, who's the Executive Director of the Citizens League. However, before we do that, I'm going to pass it to Ms. Bogie, who has an introduction and welcome and some information from Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen, who was involved in this but is unable to be here tonight, and sent some words along.
Yes, thank you. Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen is really interested in this project and was with me as we heard all of the students present their findings from the project that they've been involved in. And she was disappointed she wasn't going to be here tonight, but she promised that she's going to be listening to the recording and following up with the young leaders. So without further ado.
Hello, this is Councilmember Linnea Atlas Ingebrigtsen calling you from Denver, Colorado, where I'm at a conference focusing on expanding resources and opportunities for young people. I'm very sorry that I'm unable to be there today. I was very excited about being able to have the wonderful young people and staff from the Citizens League come and share with the council about the experiences and vision and ideas that they have. I want to encourage the council members present to really think about how we might be able to bring this message to a full meeting of the council so that we can have access for the public to this wonderful information and really challenge ourselves around thinking about how do we not just do our work to maintain the system as it currently is, but to use the information we receive and the wonderful work that was done by the young folks and the Citizens League project to inform some changes that we might be able to put into place as staff and as council members. Again, I just want to apologize deeply for not being able to be present. I'm happy that this came so quickly forward, and I do hope that we're able to get this in front of a full council meeting. Thank you so very, very much for your wonderful work, and I look forward to being able to partner more in the future on making sure that we have youth voice and innovation present at the council. Thank you.
Excellent. Boy, we're creative, aren't we?
Technology
Everyone's
at
voice
its
gets that's terrific. So thank you for that, Mary. So without any further delay, I'm going to hand this over to Ms. Hoffman. Thank you so much for being here, and we're looking forward to the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Met Council, for this opportunity to share a project that the Citizens League just completed. For the record, my name again is Pahua Hoffman. I'm the Executive Director of the Citizens League. I'm just looking at all your faces, and it was a long time ago since I've seen them. It was a very cold, I think, January or February night that last time I saw some of you, so glad to be in your company again. As most of you know, and I'll introduce this gentleman next to me in a second. As most of you know, the Citizens League has a unique connection to the Met Council in that a 1967 report led to its creation. Since that time, the Citizens League has convened studies of the council and made recommendations for its improvement. Our most recent work was in 2015 when the Citizens League led a task force that looked at the governance of the Met Council and made some recommendations, including the idea of an expanded nominations committee so that more voices could be included in the selection process of Met Council members. In January of this year, we were pleased that Governor Walz did expand the nominations committee. While some people know about the Met Council and its purpose, certainly all of you, many do not. The Met Council, as you know, is an extremely important organization to our region and by extension, our state. Charged with long-term planning for the region, it works closely with local and regional and state government. When we think about the future of the region and long-range plans like Thrive 2040, whose future are we considering? Who has traditionally not been part of these conversations? These are the questions we were asking ourselves last summer. And wanting to engage younger people in the world of policymaking and wanting to connect them in a meaningful way to local and regional government, we conceived of a project to introduce them to the comprehensive planning process. This is similar to our Capital Pathways program, where we match young leaders with government affairs professionals who work at and around the Capitol to introduce them to the legislative process. With funding from the McKnight Foundation, the Citizens League worked with these partners that you see on this slide. We worked with the Minnesota Alliance with Youth, who helped us identify the young leaders and helped us with training. Thank you to CEO Corey Redpenning and Bailey Bolter, who are here in the audience with me. We had Simon Anderson from Simon Speaks, who was our embedded futurist. He won for the coolest title. He helped us explore predictions and the possibilities about our future. Public and private partnerships are critical when thinking about the future of our region. So we were thankful to have both the St. Paul and Minneapolis Chamber of Commerce as partners so that young people can understand these issues from a business lens. And lastly, we leaned on Dr. Tom Fisher and Jess Roberts from the University of Minnesota's Design Center to help us think about this work from a human-centered design perspective. You'll hear more about this in a moment. This map, I'm sure, looks very familiar to you. This map, it was our hope to get young leaders to represent every Met Council district. But due to the timing of this project and the availability of young leaders, we were able to only get 10 students committed to the project representing 10 districts. When you hear from some of the young leaders later, they will identify themselves by name and also which district they represent. Now, I would like to turn it over to my partner, Jess Roberts, who will share a bit about human-centered design and our approach. And know that I'll be here for the duration of the presentation, so I'll stand for questions later.
Great, thank you. Welcome.
So I just wanted to give a little bit of a background on what this process looked like, how we went about the last several months with the young leaders. And really, it was sort of two key organizing frameworks. One was human-centered design, which sort of at the highest level is simply problem solving that is rooted in communities' lived experience, the human experience, and futurist orientation, which is about asking some fundamentally different questions about our future and organizing a bit more around what is possible rather than necessarily what is probable. But most importantly, there's sort of two components that drove most of this work. The first one being that those best to lead and partner with are often those that are most impacted and have the most at stake in addressing a particular challenge. So in something like planning for the future, a 2040 version of our community, who better than the folks who will still A, be alive, right? And B, likely be the economic generators of that future community. Secondly, many of the existing systems are not necessarily delivering well or equally to our communities. And so one way that we remediate this is by unlearning or engaging those who are not necessarily experts that are nested within these existing systems. And so in that way, the young folks that you'll hear from tonight and some of the work that you'll see and hear from folks that weren't able to attend, they were not experts in public policy or community planning, regional planning, which allowed them to ask some fundamentally different questions that those of us that manage, are part of, or rely on existing systems simply can't, because we have these expertise blind spots, right? That we cannot ask these questions. And so in that way, it is not just a good idea to engage younger folks, but critical to bring some of that um, new thinking and asking some of those different questions. Um, More than anything, this project was about creating space. Space for asking some of those different questions, for exploring with various communities, for arriving at unlikely insights or connections. And part of that is you have to create an opportunity for that. So I think more than anything, it was the fact that we just did it, and we gathered folks who are not typically the voices that are participating in this process, and to guide that, we used, I have a design background. As Pahua mentioned, I work for the Minnesota Design Center at the University of Minnesota. And from the design world, it's something called the studio process that we deploy to create these spaces. And essentially, it's a two-part process. One, it's these studios that the young folks participated in, where folks come together, they ask questions, they share data, they develop ideas and concepts to go out and test. And those are followed by these sprints where the individuals go out into the community to gather this data, to test these ideas, bring them back to the studios for us to discuss and synthesize, and so on and so forth. So in this project, we started in June with a kickoff to level set folks on what is this project, what is the regional planning process, some background on the design process and futurist thinking, and develop questions in which they went out in that first sprint to engage various Met Council leaders that represented their various districts. Um, that information they brought back to the first design studio to synthesize, and use that information to organize questions around questions that they would then go out in the second sprint to engage their local leaders, local planning leaders, and government leaders, and gather that information, come back to the next studio, synthesize that. That's when we had folks, including Mary, from the Met Council come in to share what is the Met Council, what do they do, maybe more importantly, what don't they do, what don't you do, what do they control, what don't they control. And that's when we developed some questions and investigations to engage the private sector, business community, because oftentimes the business community will be out in front of some policy making, particularly in sort of planning for the future. And so in that, they explored with various private nonprofit organizations on what they're doing around things like homelessness, um, and in the final studio, bringing those things together, synthesizing those, we had representatives from the St. Paul, Minneapolis Chamber share what does the chamber do, what role does the private sector have in the regional planning process. And the final sprint was for the young folks to really synthesize from all those various perspectives, all those key perspectives in the regional planning process, to develop a cohesive vision, which they'll share in a moment, as well as action steps within each of these realms, like the regional, the Met Council's perspective, the local, city scale, and then the business community, and maybe more importantly, what they themselves and or their communities can do to help promote this vision. And then finally, lessons learned throughout the process, because again, of equal importance was to make this a learning experience for all of us and to have takeaways to move this work forward. There's a lot of key deliverables in this work, but I think of primary importance was, number one, become familiar with the comprehensive planning process, and then to be able to see how that process aligned or did not align with the challenges or issues they were seeing from their own community. Understand the roles that key stakeholders play in that process, including ourselves, right? Build capacity for articulating a vision for the future, and probably most importantly, generate momentum around it, and then finally finding career paths that align with this work in the future. In fact, one of our participants in one of their interviews with a local business, it turned into a job interview, and she since has obtained full-time employment with this organization. So again, creating the space and opportunity to come to unlikely um, insights and ideas, which they will share now, but we were really there to just lend enough structure to sort of move this forward. And we appreciate all of you for your time to share some of those findings.
Should we pause for a minute? Are there any questions so far? And then we can individually ask questions as the projects are offered. Anybody have any questions? We're good. Okay.
Okay, we will skip this one since she's not here at this point. And move on to Deanna.
District 14.
Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to come and share what our experiences were with this project. I really appreciate it. Um, my project, I really focused it on. My name's Deandre, by the way.
Thank you.
My project, I really focused it on affordable housing because that is something that I'm really passionate about, and I got a lot of really interesting insights into the mechanisms that go into developing affordable housing, as well as what are some of the challenges are on different levels, like city level, the state level, and um, the private sector level. Um, so I'm gonna start with some of the action steps first, starting with systems. So from a systems perspective, something that came up a lot was zoning, and also elected officials and appointed officials and their interactions with their community members. Um, right here, sort of in the Twin Cities, there's a not in my backyard movement as it relates to affordable housing, and some of the perspectives I got from community members as well as city officials were that they feel very constrained because often there's usually a small group of usually affluent, predominantly white homeowners, property owners that are really well organized that the greatest amount of pushback comes from. So one of the ways systems can work to the advantage of people that are vulnerable and need housing is to look at things like single family zoning, which happens a lot on the city level. um, Transparency was something that came up a lot as well. So my council, city government, what are the processes that go into making these decisions? Like how much community engagement is there? From a community perspective, community members can be actively engaged in this process through several ways. So that could be social media campaigns, lobbying their policymakers if they are given the right tools, and that's something that um, policy officials can encourage community members to do as well, because of the wheels of bureaucracy and how that works. Sometimes that can be slow, and the government needs that extra push from the community in order to do something. And then from a business perspective, I spoke to this organization called Go Serve Global that uh, they develop a lot of housing across the world, and they don't really have any here. They do a lot of natural disaster preparedness work here in the U.S., but they haven't actually developed any housing here. Their housing is somewhat similar to a tiny home, but it's different. It's trademarked and it's called the safety home. And one of their homes costs about $7,000 to make, and you can retrofit it to do several things, like making it like office space or schools, even because they've done that in other countries in the world. and challenges that they expressed were government red tape. So they aren't able to develop housing in lots of cities because their area is not zoned for it, or there's pushback from like elected officials, like how is this going to affect like our property value? Um, in terms of like the insights, the most surprising thing that I learned was honestly the lack of communication between government agencies. That was something where like when I went to the planning commission, they were sort of like, well, we only do like planning, we're not sure what's going on with economic development. And I felt like that those are opportunities for officials to like communicate better with each other, because then it makes the process much more um, holistic. Um, as it relates to Met Council, we had a few members come talk to us. I was really surprised at like how limited the Met Council is in their capacity because of state statute, so they don't really have, or you guys really don't have like very much like wiggle room to do things that you'd like to do. And then I guess it affirmed like my belief that, like government works really slowly and it sometimes only works in the best interest of uh, the people they serve if pressure is put on them external. And that requires like lots of, community organizing. Um, Frustrations that I, experienced, it was sort of like a part of a much larger problem, like in terms of like the way our government is set up. So one person was like, I can't do this thing because this other government agency prevents me from doing so. So that was one of the frustrations that I experienced. And like in their packets that I think you received, there were like some diagrams. Those are just like diagrams that I came across like in my research. So like in St. Paul, like when a property is sold, um, the rent like doubles or triples when with new like renters. That is something where like cities, the Met Council, like state agencies can work with communities and intervene to make it so that people aren't being displaced, because that's like has like big social implications as well as financial ones for the city and the state. And I guess finally, my vision for the future in the region is one in which government entities such as the Met Council and local municipal governments are like more transparent about the comprehensive planning process. This was something when I first started the project, I knew of the comprehensive planning process. I didn't know what went into it. Um, and I think public hearings has been more accessible and like in terms of like when they're held, the services that are provided. So like an example would be if you're having like some sort of event where you need like public input, making sure that it's accessible to people with disabilities. Also having multiple like time slots for people to come in and like share their input, and incentivizing people to come. And that doesn't necessarily have to be monetary. It could be, things like providing childcare, because if I know I'm gonna go to this event and I don't have to worry about someone watching my kid, then I'm more likely to like share my input. But also like internal sort of culture change, so creating it so that that space is like safe, so when people come they don't feel like their voices aren't being heard, and then it was just a waste of time. So that is all I have for you guys right now. If you have any questions, I'm more than willing to answer them.
Questions for Mr. Gordon? I have a question for you. First of all, thank you for your presentation. It was just excellent. I think this project is amazing, and it's exciting to hear you struggle with the issues that we have to struggle with as well. So we're looking to you for all the answers. So my question for you, and here's a heads up for everybody else going to present, because you get to do it first. But what did you learn about yourself?
I For what I learned about myself is that like I definitely feel like more empowered to like do the work because this was, like a lovely opportunity to like learn about the process. And so for me, it's really like kind of what just said. It's about, like creating that space and inviting more people to the table and having like meaningful discussions. So I learned that I'm still very much frustrated with how government works because time constraints were an issue, like not being able to like schedule things with different policy officials. So that was definitely something that I learned, but I'm sort of like working on flipping that on its head and seeing like how can we take these frustrations and turn them into something feasible that's like positive, and how can we like get more people to engage better. And I also learned that more in terms of like how do you like bring your authentic self, because the human centered like design studios were really helpful in that regard because we sort of started it not really knowing anything. We were just supposed to bring our lived experiences and use those to inform how we went about the project. So I think those are the things I learned about myself.
Great. Yes, Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say I appreciate the work that you did and what you've learned, and want to encourage you to be an influencer. Use the tools and the information that you have gained to keep motivating you to move forward.
Thank you.
Councilmember Musa.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you. I'm really impressed with your findings, specifically the zoning and how those who need the housing most are not organized, while the others who really want to maintain the status quo are well funded and well organized. So I hope you will organize those who need the housing the most, and you'll be an organizer. I do organizing for living in my other job, so happy to chat offline. But I just want to say thank you. You're an amazing leader, and we look forward to working with you and to partnering with you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm really impressed. It was almost like therapy for me to hear you. I've been doing this for over 20 years. And my takeaways, and it's so good to be reminded and refreshed in the process too, even for the moment. But the comp plan process, again, is set out by state statute, and you've got to hit those marks. And the development process is set out in state statute, and you have to hit those marks. And you've got some public input because you've got advisory bodies, but that's also very rigid. And I really appreciate the fact that how can we get more people into really understanding the guiding and zoning, the blueprint that'll map out that community's future for years to come. And, I really want to embrace and figure out a new way to do that, and figure out how to bend those constraints a bit. There's so much better technology and trying to meet people where they're at. Because I'll tell you something, it's very rare that people show up in that process unless they're kind of mandated to be part of that process. But let me tell you, when something changes to that plan, an amendment is coming up, and people just are so unaware of how it works, they show up, but it's so late in the process. So, my takeaway is really trying to always keep in mind that the earlier we can get people into process and have it be more robust, the better results we'll have in the backside. So I appreciate that tonight because I need to be reminded of that.
Thank you, Councilwoman Johnson. I definitely think that like building better partnerships with like community orgs as well as schools. Schools are really helpful because they're like a safe space. Students are there. It's really an opportunity to learn and sometimes even get credit for it. So like being like intentional and like building those partnerships, because the Met Council might be like restricted in like what they can do, but there are like community organizations already in the community that are like really like knowledgeable about some of these issues that affect their communities. So partnering with them, because they are much more familiar with the organization that are already in their communities than they are with, say, Met Council. Like, the Met Council might seem like this foreign body that's like inaccessible and far away from them, that they are just kind of like, well, what do they know about our community issues? So that's one suggestion I have.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Gordon. I just my comment is that I I appreciate your comments about transparency. In the first 10 months on the job here, recently I've been getting some issues and complaints from constituent local officials about some of the projects that that had come through for livable communities accounts, and the crux of the issues with some of those projects is that there isn't a lot of transparency in the feedback that we give to the projects that we reject. And as a council member, I want to help demystify that process so that, you're right, we are a huge animal, and we're this nebulous organization that a lot of people still don't understand who we are and what we do. And I think that part of the demystifying of our processes will help give us a better public image to the community and have better relationships and just be better business practices as an organization. So I appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee.
Councilmember Fredson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, DeAndre, for your presentation, making District 14 proud. I represent the western half of the city of St. Paul. Just wanted to encourage you, if you have not shared your presentation with your city council members, with the mayor. I used to work for the mayor of St. Paul and served on the Planning Commission and on the zoning committee of the Planning Commission in St. Paul. And I think that there are folks in the city council that share your values, and if you bring this information to them, I'm sure they'll do their best to be responsive. So, and I'm happy to connect you to folks if you don't have relationships.
Thank you, Councilmember Fredson.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And as a St. Paul resident, I agree that people respond late, like with the whole trash thing. So a lot of passion.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Good.
Nice to meet you, councilmen and women of the Metropolitan. My name is Nisi Parker. I'm an artist. I'm the youth engagement manager at Youth Prize. And I'm also, I try to consider myself to be a community advocate. And so just a quick summary of what I did was the Sea Line experience. So I kind of categorized, after doing my research and after some thinking about my recommendations, I kind of categorized them all under one larger theme, and that is like the redesign of the Sea Line. And I'll get into why. So it won't be fast anymore. Last time we did this presentation, we had a short amount of time. So you'll see little notes throughout the PowerPoint saying I got to go fast, but I won't have to go fast anymore. Yep, so just ignore that. I do have handouts. I don't know how that will work. I brought 10 of them, so they're actually a smaller version of the research study that I did because I'm trying to save the planet. Cool.
Thank you.
So my method of research were mainly interviews. I interviewed community members, I interviewed one Met council member, and I interviewed a council member, and I did like some landlord and things like that. The ages was 16 through 50, and 90% were indigenous and or people of color. I have a literature review that I didn't add into this packet, but if you want that extra stuff, then I can send it to you. And a lot of the data came from the Metropolitan research that you guys did. So my districts were District 7 and 8. That's the ones that I focused on. I was born and raised in North Minneapolis and kind of went to school in South Minneapolis, and District 7 and 8 kind of covers the majority of Minneapolis. And well, you know that. So one major theme out of the interviews was 100% of the interviewees voiced concerns about gentrification. And that came from city council members, from landlords, and from community members. Gentrification kind of there were three major themes that came out of it, right? Um, so it's kind of like if you think of gentrification as a tree, and leaves being pros and cons coming out of that tree. There were three major cons that I seen consistently. So, just gentrification being the root of that. Um, and just to highlight, I know gentrification can be looked upon in multiple ways, right? So it can be something positive for community members and something that can also uplift a community in a sense, right? But there's this other side to it to where some people aren't benefiting as much. So I'm just going to read a small statement, just to put a frame on how I'm looking at gentrification from this perspective. Okay, cool. Research shows that there are individuals who face negative effects due to gentrification. There will be some renters that no longer are capable of paying the rent and will be displaced. In terms of education, low-income families are displaced, and that means changing the school that the child goes to. And research has also found that people that are migrating into the gentrified neighborhoods are primarily white professionals and single parents, and it is the lower to working class, elderly, and unemployed that are being displaced. So we're looking at the effects, the harmful effects of gentrification, mainly falling on mostly marginalized communities. So these are the three major themes that came out of the research of gentrification. And the three major themes were fear of community members, encouraging isolation, and further social separation. And this has come from community members that are new to the community and community members who are not to the community. So, for example, if you have a scenario where there are neighbors, right? The new neighbor is in fear of the old neighbor due to unfamiliar cultures, right? So they're coming into a culture that's not theirs and kind of these cultural norms that they haven't grown up around. So there's that fear of the unknown. And I think that's kind of like a basic human instinct to fear what we don't understand. And so coming into that, there's that. And there's also some misunderstanding sometimes on the other behalf where older community members are in fear of their neighbor's fear. So the idea that there has been multiple incidents, I don't know if you guys have heard of them, but, getting called for barbecue smells, um, things like there was a story where a man got arrested for loitering on his yard. And things such as that kept coming up in different conversations. You found a lot of people saying things like, every time I go out to my car, I see someone watching me, or things like, anytime I invite friends over, the police are called. So certain things like that kind of encourages isolation from each other. Two, community resources are modified to feel exclusive, no longer welcoming to long-term residents. So looking at community spaces that are being built due to gentrification, a lot of them are appealing to the newer comers. So the long-term residents are often finding that the places that they used to go to um, are changed and that they don't really feel as welcomed as before. And also the new ones that are coming up also feel exclusive. So it feels like community resources are no longer for them. And then also loss of affordable home and land ownership. So um, as you guys would know, there's a huge disparity of African Americans and Latino Americans owning homes and land in comparison to their white and Asian counterparts. And one of the strongest ways to fight off gentrification is to be able to secure your housing. And I've been told by certain interviewees that what's the point of owning your home if the bank owns your land anyway and can force you to sell? So there's not a way to secure if you don't really weigh the both of those options of home and land ownership. So I came up with a list of recommendations for the Met Council. And after meeting with the Met Council, I have came up with my recommendations, and then we had a meeting with them, and they came in and they told us kind of what they were, what they did, and was involved in a lot of different areas. And what I realized is that the process of the city planning system makes it hard to implement new ideas that address community issues. And I think the way that the city planning system is operating and like the timeline of it and then like the requirements of it um, forces a repetitive um, address to community issues, if that makes sense. It seems like it forces people to stay in a certain routine, and due to like just the restriction of it all and the timeline of it all, it's really hard to implement ideas that that comes from community voice. And also, money, we're always broke, so things like that. But one thing I did get from the meeting was the things that you guys were in control of. And what I saw that you guys were mostly in control of was the Metro Transit system. And so I had asked about the Sea Line and what parts that you guys kind of had a plan. And they said that you guys, well, I don't know if it was you guys, but the Metropolitan Council had a play in the design, the implementation, and the management. So I was like, oh, the whole thing. And they're like, yeah, pretty much. So I kind of revitalized all of my recommendations to go with the Metro Transit, which is why I'm focusing on the Sea Line. And in an effort to make these recommendations easy to implement, cheap to implement, and not really different than what we've been doing, but adding just a few more details. So yeah, I'll go to this first and then I'll go backwards. So what you see in yellow were my original recommendations, and what you see in blue were the recommendations that I had redesigned. So I'm going to focus on the ones in blue, and if you want, you can check out the ones in yellow as I talk. So, oh, sorry. So the first recommendation is allow for informational representatives to ride buses to provide information. And this was inspired by the Mad Dads program. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but I think they're sponsored by MPD, I think, and they go around and they sit on buses and they provide information and resources to people who are riding the buses, right? But it's more so around things like childcare or things around finding a job. Um, and then they sit there and they like sign you up for things and like that. So I was thinking, like, what if you just do that, but you open it up to more people than just Mad Dads, and you open it up to other community representatives, like if you have people who know how to do home and land ownership, if you have real estate agents committed to community change and they want to give out this information or they want to show someone how to become a successful first time home buyer or land buyer. Why can't they just sit next to you the same way that Mad Dads does? Also, number two was my second recommendation kind of addresses my first and second original recommendation. So if you look at it, there's two recommendations above this blue one on the second line. And that is providing informational pamphlets at bus stops and on buses to inform community members about community events, farmers markets, and park guides. So one of the things that we had talked about was like, how do you make community members engage with each other? And how do you utilize the spaces there to inform community members about those spaces that allows for them to engage? So that's kind of what that one came out of, is like, how do you just let community members know about things that they can do in their neighborhood, because it's kind of harder to find. And when you finally do find it, it's probably a past date. So how do you keep that more current? Allow for community facilitators to utilize the space of Metro Transit with riders' consent to act as community researchers, informers, and advocates. So, for example, if you have folks like Appetite for Change who wants to give an information session about healthy eating, knowing that Minneapolis kind of has that bad rep of unhealthy foods due to unaccessibility, right? So if you have like people like this that are going on the bus, people like YPAR, I don't know if you guys know what YPAR is. It's Youth Participatory Action Research. It's a new, an emerging research method that is now being more considered, and it's pretty much young people owning the research in their communities and then communicating it back and then taking an action step due to the research. So it's like kind of counteracting the idea of researchers coming into the community, giving these pamphlets out, you answering yes or no questions, and then that's the end of the research and you never know where it went. Um, so it's kind of like, how do you allow for community members to own that research and fix their community using it to their own benefit? And then how about having them go on these buses and gaining research this way? So talking to people who are on their way to work, talking to the common community member. I think it's hard sometimes when there's no basis of trust and you're going out and you're getting interviews from random people, though that information is important. I think that with a lack of trust in community members, it's kind of hard to actually get impactful information. So knowing that on the buses there are regulars and there are people that show up every day because they have the same routines, and then being able to build relationships and then get more impactful information. What can I do for research in our community? And then also rise with financial advisors. So kind of touching base on the first idea too, is like, how do you um, teach a man to fish instead of giving grants and doing things like this that have become repetitive and not getting us anywhere. So how do you not recreate the wheel and give people what they actually need, which is information and the know-how on how to handle financial and break through financial barriers and systems that hold us back with financial barriers. And the last one is use the bus design, outside visuals to provide historical and local information about the communities of color in Minneapolis. So one thing that I heard from certain community members is that they feel like they don't know anything about us, so like they don't really understand us. And how do you allow for someone to break a stereotype before entering into a conversation with someone that they don't know yet, right? So, how do you start to plant seeds in someone's mind that questions the status quo, right? So, then these seeds are like just pretty much visuals and small facts that you see on like the ads of the inside of the bus or the visuals on the outside of the bus. And it could be things like Ojibwe and Dakota history, among cultural contributions to the city and Black-owned businesses in the area. So, like, how do you like uplift the communities that are feeling attacked, for lack of a better word? Okay, so these are my final thoughts. So, transit, parks, and development all play a role in gentrification. So, the Met Council has many opportunities to increase equity and address the negative impacts of gentrification. Um, the way of planning and governmental systems work, um, the way planning and governmental systems work are too inflexible and not responsive enough to our dynamic community needs, and these systems need to change in order for anything to be progressed. Um, I also want to say, don't let our work be in vain. A lot of young people came together and did a lot of research and did a lot of work, and we just want to make sure that it's taken just as seriously as anyone else would be taken as seriously, you know. And the money was great, but that's not why we did it. So we just want to see some action done in some type of capacity. And please look at the packet and please hit me up if you want. And I do have like a lot more information digging into this and touching base on it. So if you want to talk about more stuff, then we can do that. And then there was something that I skipped that I wanted to go back to. Cool. So part of this design, we had to do a futurist idea. So how do we know that this idea can last, knowing that the city planning system is a 10-year process? How do you know that this will last 10 years from implementation? So my futurist idea was the C is for Community Act. And this act allows for people to pay for their bus fare by their phone. So instead of using transfers, using go-to cards that after a while and after looking at the numbers can do um, bad for our environment. because the paper and plastic, of course. And then also the idea that employers can log into your app and provide funds for transportation benefits. For a lot of different things that I contract with, sometimes transportation benefits is like a part of the package, and um, I take sometimes I take the bus, and that'll just be nice to have bus fare. So it's kind of weird buying a go-to card and it goes away and you never refill it. So how do you reduce that too? Also, C-line community representatives. So talking about the MADDAD folks and the financial advisors and doing YPAR. These folks can go on and go through a registration system or process and be registered community representatives to where they can schedule things on certain dates and on certain lines. If they want to target a certain community, they can, you know, schedule things on certain routes and stuff like that. So that reduces the hands-on for the Met Council. Also, the apps will show upcoming events, so it'll like allow for a calendar for people to log on, and then it can become a thing where people are riding the bus just for a workshop instead of actually having to go somewhere. And then also Cash. So something I heard from other folks as I was trying to research what people felt about my recommendations was that they felt like with the bus transit system, there's no rewards for being a long-term customer. So someone who's been riding the bus for 20 years is treated the same way as someone who just moved to the city a week ago. So like, how do you give benefits for being a frequent rider? And with this is like what the Cash is about. So the more you ride the bus, a certain percentage goes to a small bank, and every now and then you can get a free transfer, things such as that. You can gain Cash by attending certain community representative events. So this is another incentive, making sure that people are actually showing up and wanting to do it. Maybe they can ride for free if they log in to a workshop event. Participating also in Met Council community engagement events. So one of the things that were expressed to us was that you can't implement community voice if they don't show up. So this is an incentive for folks to show up. Maybe you get $5 for coming to one of these things or something like that. That I don't know, allows you to get incentives because it's really hard to get someone to do something for you if there's no incentive. And yeah, so that's mine.
That's a great presentation. Thank you very much for the questions and comments for Ms. Parker. Yes, Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for your presentation. This was very good. So I chair the Transportation Committee, so this is a very important area for me. And I will make sure that your voices are in turn in vain. In fact, I'm going to pass some of this information along, some of your recommendations. We have an effort going on where we're looking at how do we look at transit and what other values we build into where we put routes and that type of thing, because we think that's important as we kind of build out the system. And what I really took away from your presentation is really the important need, not just of the like infrastructure where bus stops and all that, but even the bus itself as part of the community, and how we have to look at how we're connecting to the people and to the community, not just moving through neighborhoods. And I think that's a really strong message, and I think that's something that I will definitely bring back to the committee. So thank you for this. This was great.
Oh, thank you, Councilwoman Barber. Is that how I say it?
That's it.
Okay.
Councilmember Lee.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Parker, this slide is this is a great slide, and I think this is really futuristic. There are entire cities in China right now where the two main options to pay for transit is facial recognition scan or phone. And so, your first point is already beginning to happen in throughout the world. And your slide with recommendations, the whole thing I was thinking about reading during this entire slide was that I really commend you for making you really put the human part back into human-centered design thinking, and I think with these recommendations, it really reminds us that our buses and our transitways are not just big moving chunks of metal, and that there's a human interface to it. And so thank you for your passion and your research.
Yep. Well, one of the things that motivated me to go forward with the bus is that it's the very it's a very it's a time that's limited, right? But it's a small it's very few of opportunities where this person and this person have to be face to face and have to sit down and be in the same space with each other. Um, Due to just responsibilities in general. So how do you utilize that time to encourage conversation to where this person who just moved in a week ago is no longer afraid of this person who's been here for 10 years and is comfortable and then now is uncomfortable. So how do you encourage that conversation and break down that misunderstanding that breaks down that fear?
Thank you.
Councilmember Lilligren.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Parker, is it Nisi? Is that?
Nisi, yep.
Nisi, yeah. Thanks for your work on this and your really excellent presentation. And these recommendations are cool. And I just got to tell you how impressed I am with the way that you adapted your recommendations once you identified the C line as your priority and still kept the spirit and the thought that were in the broader recommendations and really focused them in. I mean, that really helps us as policymakers, that kind of focus. And the one thing that I'm really intrigued with is the idea of activating the space inside the bus as community space. And it is, like you point out, it is. So I take the bus, that's how I get around, or I take transit, and there's all these kinds of information, being passed back and forth. There's all these people who would never probably be sitting next to each other, shoulder to shoulder, except on the bus or on the
With headphones on.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So get them out and start engaging, and I think that really opens the door for us to think of the bus as community space. I think that's really a powerful finding, and so I wanted to say that and share that with you, and then also ask, as you were doing your research, did you see a lot of that happening? I mean, I know I see it. It really is community space, but did you see a lot of that sort of less formal kind of sharing and
In that space and
spontaneous?
on the bus? Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I think just to be clear, like part of my research was all of my research here was intentional, but I also drew a lot from my experiential knowledge, and I've been taking the bus my entire life. And knowing that I've met people on buses and that I've built relationships on buses and that I built memories on buses and all these other things that kind of just come from being around that space. I mean, to be honest, especially for a young person of color, Metro Transit is a vital part of survival. Some people, like, there's these things that you just know to do and how to utilize the space of a bus to, like, really get you what you need. So, like, knowing how to ask for a ride or, like, the right way to do that, or knowing the way certain buses work certain ways so you can get to where you're going faster, and, like, all these things that, like, we utilize the bus, but we just don't utilize it to its fullest potential with the circumstance it's providing.
So thanks for expanding our minds with your recommendations. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilmember Sterner.
Great. Thank you, Chair. Hi, Nisi. I just had a kind of a question. Thanks for your presentation. But one of them with your interviews were like 16 to 50, and I'm just wondering.
That's why. Okay, I know that's a really large span, right?
Yeah.
That's because the oldest person was just 50.
Okay.
And the
All
youngest
right,
person was just 16. The average age that I was looking at was 20 to 35.
2035. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember Lindstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Getting back to the gentrification question and how you accurately pointed out about how some of the new neighbors might be scared of the old neighbors. And you identified that there needs to be more conversation between the two. And I'm just wondering, if you were a city council member or a mayor, what sort of events or programs or what would you recommend to actually make that happen?
Well, if I was a city council or a mayor, with full disclosure that I've never been one, right? So I don't know how that works on a day-to-day basis. So what I'm saying now probably won't be what I actually do. But if I was able to do it my way and with what I want, I would do research a lot more and actually focus on participatory action research, because essentially that's what being a council member and a mayor is um, researching your community, knowing your community, building trust with your community, building relationships with community members. I think as a council member or a someone who's in a governmental status, it's extremely revolutionary to be able to drive down your community and people actually know you and are able to talk to you and are able to feel comfortable to like actually relate with you on a daily basis type thing. Um, of course, people who are up there know a lot of people, but they usually know a lot of people that are up there with them. So how do you connect the folks that are at the bottom and the folks that you are trying to solve the issues for um, with them to where, they know each other well? Um, I lost sight of your question because I got really deep into that first part. Can you bring it back?
Yeah, if I may, Madam Chair, I was asking if you were a council member or a mayor.
What would I do?
What would you
Yes,
do? But
okay.
then I thought, oh, you know what? You totally don't need to be a mayor or a council member to make the types of changes that you're talking about.
Oh
You
no,
just
but
need
for
to be,
future
you can
reference,
be a young
just in
person,
case
you can be a
I'm the
business
mayor.
owner. Yeah, you can go ahead.
I think that researching and then responding authentically to that research in collaboration and in partnership rather with community members that are on the grassroots is something um, innovative, and I think that can transpire into a lot of change. And I always tell people that don't often connect with grassroots community members is that if things go wrong and the idea that you came up with wasn't that great, you can also always say that, it wasn't mine, it was the community's idea. So then with that, it releases a lot of the pressure of community response. It releases a lot of pressure of some community members getting upset off of the unforeseen harmful effects that it can have, right? So then looking at that and then being able to say, look, we did this with community members, it's not working, and then saying, let's bring them back and do something different. And also noting that community change are like showers. Um, I always say this because you're never going to wake up and not need a shower again, right? You're always going to wake up and need another shower. And if you ever wake up and feel like you don't need a shower, you should think about your life and maybe like kind of revisit some of your norms. But I think that every time you implement something in the community, time passes and time changes things. So you have to change with it. And I think that community change is something that is repetitive and will never stop. And I think that in order to do it, we have to stop doing repetitive things um, so we can change with what the community needs.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Sure. I do have another question, and thanks, Nancy, for allowing me to ask another one. And so I was a city council member for 12 years. When I ran for city council, I think I was probably the last person anyone thought would run, and certainly anyone thought would win the seat. So I started in the Minneapolis City Council. Tried to do what you're talking about, be very in the community, very accessible. And one of the things I faced a lot was once I had that election certificate that said you're a city council member now, some of my grassroots activist friends then saw me as part of the system.
You're the man now.
So then they wouldn't deal with me in the way that they had previous to that. And so I'm just wondering if participation in this project and in this program has maybe made you more open to the idea of sitting at the table with the man and working toward the solutions.
I think, okay, so this is a paradox that I myself kind of fall victim to sometimes, right? How do you disrupt systems that you are a part of, right? How do you set fire to a field that you're standing in the middle, right? How do you destroy a ladder when you're on the roof already, right? So it's like this idea that now that you are a part of the system, that the community kind of rejects you because they feel like you traded. And before, when I was younger, I used to believe in the term that I don't know if you guys ever heard of Angela Davis, not Angela Davis, Asada Shakur. I don't know if I should, I don't know. But Azara Shakur was the one who said that the only politician you can trust is an unpaid one, right? So then coming from that mindset of looking at how the government has like kind of oppressed the community and looking at how um, you are a part of a group that is stereotyped as an oppressor, right? And how do you defy those stereotypes? Um, and I think that's something that a lot of us face, but I think it is possible. So I think what you like maybe could try is like utilizing your community resources, but not just yours, and utilizing those folks that have just known you for 10 years and didn't stop. And then utilizing them to bring you back into the community, and also just having community liaisons that can connect you. And after time, those community liaisons won't be liaisons no more because I can't say liaison again, but you've built that trust. So it's like you kind of went out and then you're just like, hey guys, I'm still the same. And like, how do you show that in an authentic way? And I'm sure you tried. I'm sure you tried, and I'm not sure what to tell you. So.
Yeah, no, that's really. I just encourage you to stay open to that. You know.
Oh yeah, yeah, no.
To support those people who are willing to go inside the system and try to change it from.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
It's important liaison to have.
Oh, cool.
There, yeah. So thanks.
No doubt.
Any other comments? So what did you learn about yourself, Ms. Parker?
What did I learn?
What did you learn about
I'm
yourself?
incredible.
That's
what I learned.
That's a great answer.
I've been doing it.
Well, this was outstanding. And so everything that you brought up and all of your solutions, as you're talking, I'm thinking they are all rooted in trust.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one of the most challenging things that we as a society face is trust in one another, trust so that we can advance for everyone. And this is just outstanding. So thank you very much. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you guys.
Nice.
And next up. Oh, I'm sorry,
Sure.
Councilmember.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to do a time check here. These presentations are great, and I want to hear them. My only concern is we have another presentation.
Yes.
After these, and so I'm wondering if you would be open to, or the council would be open to moving that presentation to a future meeting so we have adequate time for these presentations.
Well, we're definitely going to hear all of these, and we don't want to have anybody be short on time. I don't know the agendas for future and whether that there is a time frame where our next presentation could happen. Do you know, Ms. Bogey? Or do we
Sure,
want to
I'm going to
continue?
look out at the presenters of the next business item and.
We are certainly open to that.
You're open to.
We don't know the schedule either, but we are very important dialogue, and we're enjoying hearing from other researchers as well. So if we would make more sense time-wise to push it to a different date.
Thank you for your generosity. I know you did a lot of preparation for this meeting. We appreciate that. We will look forward to hearing that, but we don't want anyone to be shorted on time. So thank you, Councilmember Fredson, for bringing that up. And we'll go to the next individual.
Madam Chair, I wasn't clear what the determination was at the end.
The second presentation we will do in a future
Thanks,
meeting.
and I really, because I'm looking forward to it. Looks like a great
Yes.
presentation. It also looks like kind of a long one as well, and I want to give that full
correct.
opportunity too. But I do want to hear from our young guests today. So thank you.
We're good.
Hello, everybody. Okay, let me not be too loud. Okay, so my
No,
name is
take your
Essence.
time.
My name is Essence Blakemore. I thank you all for taking the time to listen to us. We worked really hard. I decided to prepare a poem for my final report out throughout the process. I learned a lot, and I'll just be sharing a little bit about the poem and just the process and my experience. So I'll start. Is there a reason for a vision? When people like me, where I come from, have no say in the decision, we want to change the looks, narratives, and the stigmas. We fight against black men not being humanized in hoodies. These are our dilemmas. We know how to apply for assistance, but not register for school and to vote. We say we want to liberate the people, but in reality, we offer a false hope. Creating change is a lot harder than it should be, just the way the forefathers always planned it would be. To bring change, this body has to talk to this one, and then this one has to talk to the next. I think this is how authenticity gets lost within the text. I think you all call it bureaucracy. Or invested interest in keeping the language complicated and complex. I don't see a system, I see barriers. You want to be equitable and engaged, but classifying me as marginalized or POC. What are you saying? Do you even see me? I don't see a system. I don't see a system working with us. I see us working ourselves in. Because unfortunately, my seat and volume at the table is determined by my skin. I'm determined to educate my people because I think it's time we see a real win. But since you asked, I'll tell you my vision. It requires practicing equity like a religion. I see us having conversations about something that's real. I want to bring about change that the people can feel. Anika is gracious, and Jason's clothing line is empowering and uplifting. Jason gave me $200 worth of books, so at my community event, that's what I'll be gifting. I see black men in crisp suits with their dreads braided to the back. I see sis at the table with her nails colorful weaves, not feeling self-conscious for looking too black. I see universal love and general understanding. I see generational traumas actually being addressed. Met Council, thank you for the space and the time to express. But again, with everything that I said, is there a reason for a vision? I just want to just share a little bit about the process and can I step back? Okay. So it was an awesome process. Like that poem, I think it kind of has like a heavy feel, but overall, this has been an amazing process. I've got to meet amazing people, but the thing that stuck with me the most was just that this was new to me. We brought our experience to the table, and what my experience was very little. I didn't know much about the council. I didn't know about city council or just these different bodies that existed. So when we got the different recommendations of people we should reach out to for meetings, we did that. I got the chance to meet with Councilmember Lee, and that was awesome. He gave me a lot of information about Met Council, but it was just so much to take in. And it's like Met Council deals with City Council, so then I started to look into what City Council was about, and it's just like I'm 20 years old, and these are all things that I've never heard of. And the big thing was, I talked to people in my family about it, and they're like, I don't know nothing about City Council. Like, what are you doing? That's good. You always doing something and I'm just do you know how important this is? This is affecting our day-to-day lives, and the thing is, people are totally disengaged with something that's really important. And the biggest thing when I was having the meetings is just we're working on equity, we're talking about equity, but it's just I don't feel that it's really coming through the way it should, because there's a big group of people that don't know about Met Council. They're not really aware of City Council. Like the election just happened. I got people responding on my social media like, "What election?" And I'm just like, guys, you have to engage. So I think that that's on a larger scale, we should hold those positions accountable. But my biggest takeaway was just how do you mobilize the community around you? What do you do for yourself? Because I'm learning about these things, so getting involved. I had the chance to help Anika Bowie with her campaign. It was cool. Got to do door knocking, getting other people involved. So that was super cool. Me and Jason Soul, we had a meeting. He talked to me about how his clothing line, he was helping within schools, and just kind of getting people involved in that conversation. And I think that's the biggest thing. How do we get people engaged and involved? So recently, I've just started a YouTube channel, a Facebook group, just different things to kind of create that conversation in spaces where they wouldn't usually be had. Um, yeah, so that's kind of been my takeaway and what I'm trying to do. Um, it's really hard to create change for people. Um, it's hard to create change when you don't know their story. You don't really have that experience at the table. And even me, I have some life experience, but all the different situations that are being addressed, I don't have that experience, and it's just I feel we're dismissing a certain group. Respectability politics is a thing. Some people feel that they're not this process isn't for them. They feel that they don't have a space or a place to vote or say what's going on around them. And I'm like, it's totally your space. So yeah, accountability has been my biggest takeaway. Everyone kind of holding people accountable, but self accountability also amongst the community. So yeah, thank you for the time. It's not very long, but that's been my biggest takeaway from it all.
Great. Questions, comments? Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you. I really appreciated your poem. I think having communication with different mediums is just a great way to approach this. I would encourage you to network, all of you, to network with the council members, find an area of interest And then if we know that there's an area of interest, then we can provide that information or make some connections as well.
Okay. Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would love to get a copy of your poem. I was blown away by it. I do limericks, the kind that you can repeat in public. And I struggle with limericks, and mine have little meaning to them. I use them as little toasts for people at celebrations. Yours was powerful, and I would love a copy of it. I also want to echo what Councilmember Chambliss said in terms of the networking. That was fabulous, and the self-accountability. I think that's probably what speaks to all of us here as members of the council, and what we're trying to do as good representatives of not only the council but the districts we represent. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Lindstrom.
I was impressed with your poem as well, and I just wanted to let you know, in case you don't already, that some communities have what's called sidewalk poetry. I know my community does, Falcon Heights, and the city of St. Paul also has sidewalk poetry. Usually they're a little bit shorter than your poem, but I'd encourage you to take a look at that. And it's stamped right into the sidewalk. That's the whole point. So thousands, millions of people walk right over it every single day. It's really neat. And it's there for a long, long time.
Councilmember Lilligren.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And will you say your name again for me, please? I was looking at.
Yeah, my name is Essence Blakemore.
Thanks, Ms. Blakemore. Essence. So when you were learning about all this stuff that you didn't know, and I would say don't feel bad that you're 20 and you're just learning this. I think I was 40 when I first started learning it, and that's when I was running for city council. And so as you learned about this stuff that you didn't know, but what was the biggest, what surprised you the most about the system?
The biggest thing, okay, about the system. I would just, I guess, to say that a lot of things that happen with my council just take place with city council. But aside from that, when I was doing door knocking within St. Paul, Ward 1, a lot of people had a lot of commotion about trash. And it was just, it was the most bizarre thing to me because I didn't hear about the trash. I'm a renter. I live downtown St. Paul. So it was totally foreign to me. But that was like the biggest takeaway. I'm like, why is this the problem? That was my thing. Why are we focusing on this? Like, I get it, but.
Right, interesting. And
Broad.
I just want to really commend you for making your way to a campaign. When young people ask me how to sort of learn about how things work, in a nonpartisan way, I'll just say I often encourage them to find a candidate and volunteer in that campaign. You're going to learn so much, and you're going to learn about how things work and about issues. Sometimes issues you don't really care that much about, like trash, but it's a great way.
And in response to that, also with getting the community engaged, I felt Anika would be perfect. She's young. She looks like us. This is someone you guys can actually say, what is she doing? You want to get engaged because a lot of times it's intimidating for people. And recently I've been doing interviews with people just in the community that are part of this disengaged community to say what will bring you, what do we need to do to do that. So just even that's kind of been interesting. That's been like an interesting takeaway because recently it's kind of turned into another research project on its own. So
keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments? So you pretty much told us, but my universal question, what you learned about yourself? Did you have anything that you wanted to add? I think we've heard much, but if there's anything else that you learned about yourself during the process?
I would just say that I learned to trust myself and that I'm capable. It was like a lot for me to feel like I could put this YouTube video out. Like they're not gonna buy this, but people are buying it. So I'm just like, okay, so it's the thing. But just learning to trust myself, honestly, and just kind of getting it out there.
That's great. And now you have all of us behind you as well. So we're all on your team. One of my questions to you is, so as you're talking to your friends, your colleagues, the individuals that you interact with who have been disengaged, and you speak to them about how they need to get in the game and about the election and so forth, what kind of response are you getting? Are you being, because you're very engaging and inspiring, so are you getting that back?
What I'm getting, people say, since I'll do the interview because I want to help you get done what you're trying to do. And I say, okay, cool. And the biggest thing is, one of my things is like, what do you value? Because I got to know where your values are to know what will get you to sit down for 2 hours to listen to whatever. So a big thing is money. People value money, and a lot of people don't have what they value, and it's just like, I can't worry about this if I don't have this. And I'm like, okay, well, what can we do to generate that? But that's a big thing. People are just like, well, I want some money, and I'm just like, okay, that's valid. Um, Another thing, I wish I had my book up here. I'm just getting a lot of they don't feel like it's for them. In the midst of me talking to people who are experts about their community and these issues, I get a lot of like, I'll explain, but I don't know. And I'm like, you do know. Like, as much as you say you don't know, you do know exactly what you're talking about. So I see a lot of people that I feel like over time have been told like their voices are dimmed down. So a lot of people are like not really open to share, but they're willing to come. They're just like, what are we going to talk about? Another big thing. They're not educated on this. I say, how do you feel about mass incarceration? Well, what's mass incarceration? Tell me about that. I'm like, oh my God, you're a black man in America and you don't know what mass incarceration is. And this is what I mean when I say people aren't aware of what's going on. It's just like, well, I read the new Jim Crow, but that's not everybody. That's not my culture. That's not what we're just doing. So it's just like, that's a big thing. They're like, well, if you sat me down and explained more to me about it, maybe I would have something to say. Like, I have something to say, but the language, I don't have the language to say it. So a big thing with me right now is just trying to get that language out there. I plan on starting a book club and everything. Jason Soul gave me some of his books, so that's the first step. I think putting that out, that'll be a good tool for us to just kind of talk, eat, and start. Right.
And as you're engaging with your various communities that you do engage with, I would tell you, I think on behalf of everybody, that you could encourage anyone to be in touch with any of us, as well as their local electeds and so forth. But I think any one of us would be proud to sit down and have these conversations. So please use us as a resource as well. Thank you for your outstanding presentation. Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome.
My name is Eva Collins. I'm a junior at St. Anthony Village High School, which is in District 8, but I do live in New Brighton, which is in District 10. So when I came to this project, I honestly didn't know anything about the comprehensive planning process, so I came into it prepared to learn a lot, and I definitely did. In like the first conversations I had, the word sustainability and resiliency came up a lot. And if you've been paying attention to the news whatsoever, you realize that those are really big things in our society right now. So initially, that was my vision, to create a community that was a lot more sustainable and resilient than what we have now, and especially going forward with the 2040 plan, like what that would look like. The first few conversations I had were with my representative, Peter Lindstrom, city planners within my district. I met with almost every city planner in my district. It was a lot of work and a lot of time, but it revealed a lot about the challenges and strengths that my district faces. Because it's like Falcon Heights and New Brighton, which are pretty first-rank suburbs, and then like Blaine and North Oaks, which face really different problems. It was revealing and helped shape a lot of how I moved forward. And then I just noticed in every conversation I had, there were problems with sustainability and inequity and resiliency and how to move forward when dealing with the climate and our growing communities and our developing communities. Like Blaine, they face the largest growing population in the state, and there's so much to do with sustainability there, and so much that isn't tackled or addressed whatsoever. And there's a lot of back and forth that I found I'd ask Blaine, like, well, what are you doing for sustainability? And they're like, oh, well, what the Metropolitan Council will let us do. And then I talk to the Metropolitan Council and they're like, oh, but the cities have that under control. So there's just a lot of back and forth, and I found that really interesting because that's a miscommunication that can be easily handled for something that's really quite a big deal. And then as I move forward, I actually worked with the Minnesota Alliance for Sustainability and then some community organizations that deal with sustainability, particularly the one in St. Anthony, which is District 8, but it was all good. And we talked about organics recycling and renewable energy, which are two very achievable goals for towns, especially in the first-rank suburbs of Minnesota. So organics recycling is a project that lots of counties have programs for that cities can take advantage of. St. Anthony has the Ramsey County Organics Recycling Grant, and they have a facility right next to the community center where residents can compost. And I talk to people, and citizens love it, and the town loves it, and the county loves it, and it's just a really great program, especially because food waste is a really large problem in Minnesota. And even though it's a reactive solution, it helps reduce food waste and is actually beneficial to the community and our gardens, our flower beds, and it's a great solution there. Insights I've gained from this project are just how to approach dealing with government officials. I'm 16, and so that was a big deal to send an email and ask for a meeting. It's not as intimidating as it seems. I've learned a lot about sustainability and resiliency and how we need to move forward in order to make our visions realities and how quickly that needs to all happen in order to make our planet a healthy place to inhabit. Yeah, that's what I've got.
Great, that's great. And did you have your hand up? Oh,
I didn't, but I could.
I assumed that you would. So yes, Councilmember Lindstrom, you can lead us off.
If it's any consolation, I'm intimidated by 16-year-olds. So, kind of even there, but I was just talking to a council member from Falcon Heights last night, and he was talking about organics recycling and how he wishes to bring it to that community, and how he's getting some pushback about. Gosh, is there going to be any smell or rodents or, this sort of thing? And I was encouraged to hear that you spoke to St. Anthony residents and city officials, and it sounds like everybody is really in love with it and thinks it's fantastic. And I'd love to get your notes from those conversations or just put you in touch with the Falcon Heights City Council member so that you could share that information with him, because it's being decided in that city very soon. So the timing is perfect.
Cool, thank you.
Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm curious about your thoughts when you proposed the issues about sustainability to, the local council and then to the Met Council. Did you have some thoughts about how you would want to move forward, given that maybe there was that lack of accountability? And also the second question is, do you see yourself continuing to get involved in sustainability issues or policy based on your experience?
Yeah, so to answer your first question with the kind of disconnect, my interviews that I had and research that I did was earlier on in the process, where I was just gathering more information about the struggles my towns and districts and stuff were facing. So I was a little directionless at that point, and I didn't have much to say. So no, I didn't know how to move forward when proposing something due to sustainability. And then with career paths and for sustainability, we talked a lot about that in our design studio process, and I think it's interesting, city planning and comprehensive planning and policy with the sustainability added on top. So I've definitely been looking into that when looking at majors at schools and just potential career paths.
Okay, so probably if you're like me, you kind of process things. So when you do go to that next step, that's when the ideas and the solution and in that those results will come through. So thank you.
Anyone else? This was just excellent. Thank you so much. It's all of the things that each of you are saying are lessons for us, because you look at these problems and challenges with fresh eyes. And I think one of the dangers with anyone involved in policy planning or local government and things is that it's easier to do things the way we've always done them. And so when we're challenged to look at things anew and through youth's eyes, it's really, really helpful to us, I think. So thank you for that. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, you didn't ask your question.
Oh, yes.
The universal question.
Pardon?
You didn't
Oh,
ask
my
the
question.
universal-
I'm sorry. Thank you. Well, thank you for reminding me. And you've had lots of time to think about it. What did you learn about yourself?
I've learned a lot about balance and just like figuring out how to balance like meetings in summer, and like marching band was a big thing this summer. If you saw my picture, I went to BAMP, and so I had to figure out I went to BAMP with the marching band, and just like balancing like meeting deadlines and also doing everything else was like a real big thing.
That is a huge lesson that you will use throughout your life. So incredible to have that kind of a lesson at 16. Ooh, boy, I wish. So, okay. Yes, Councilmember Vento.
Madam Chair, I apologize. You got me curious, and I went to the Ramsey County website to find out about composting, and they have a piece on their site about, they have a pick up a free food scraps collections organic recycling starter kit. And they've got suggestions on how to get started. So thank you. I'm going to get started. You motivated me.
Awesome.
Thanks.
There you go. Success. Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Now, Jake, this is our last presentation.
Oh.
And Madam Chair?
Yes.
We save the best to last. Sorry.
Good afternoon. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. Hello, my name is Jake Yang. I'm a freshman at North High School in North St. Paul. I live in Maplewood, and this project has helped me learn about the comprehensive plan. So, in the comprehensive plan, you already know about the comprehensive plan, but before, I have never heard of the comprehensive plan. I'm sure many of my peers have never heard about the comprehensive plan and what it means for our day-to-day lives. So, as I was researching about the concept of comprehensive plan and about what I wanted to look into, I found like an underrepresented voice was homeless and people with low income. So homeless people and people with low income are typically unable to attend the hearings for the plans, and the majority are never aware of the plans. So I've never really considered how the government was dealing with the homeless and low-income individuals. I only had basic knowledge of homeless shelters. So my vision for the future has been open to see the comprehensive plan can be used to help the homeless and low-income individuals and the others in need. So the plan can be used to help them by creating new zoning areas that can be used for the homeless tiny homes. I'm sure you've heard of the homeless tiny homes. They're just about the trailer-sized homes, as you can see in the picture, the second picture below, right next to the vision. So for the comprehensive plan, the homeless tiny homes, affordable housing, and we can use the land more efficiently. So what I mean efficiently, I mean by the zoning could be, there's an acre of land, the zoning set for one housing unit. We only put one housing unit, there's tons more land, but we are not able to put more houses there because it's only set for one unit of housing. So by more efficiently, I was thinking maybe we could make it so it could be like 5 units of housing and take up more land to make it more affordable and more people can get more homes. So the government can help also by changing and modifying the zoning laws to make homeless homes more widely available in more areas. So the zoning can also make it, so we can use it more efficiently for more units of housing. So the community can help impact these changes by being more aware of more aware of how influential they are to the changes in the comprehensive plan. The zoning laws and how they want their community to look in the future. They can help by welcoming the idea of tiny homes into the communities and be more welcoming to the new people in their community. So a big part of the community that can help out is the faith community. So the faith community can assist because of the church's land is able to be used for the tiny homes. The faith community is able to do this because of the Arlupa law, which I'm sure you guys are aware of. The Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act that states the churches are able to do what they want with their land if it follows their mission. An example of a church with a tiny home is in Maplewood called Woodland Hills Church. A nonprofit, in Woodland Hills Church, as you can see in the first picture with the tiny home. So, for the businesses, nonprofit businesses can also help the movement to have tiny homes, as they can be instrumental in making the homes more widely available, make it more widely available to the public by making it more visible in like ads or advertisements on buses or advertising in buses. So, and they can also help educate people on the tiny homes. So, like my peers could learn about the tiny homes, and when they grow older, they can be more invested into the tiny homes or other projects that involve the community. So communities can also help the nonprofits by donating their time and materials to building the home. Something that surprised me during this was the existence of the comprehensive plan. Also, how extensive the plan is and how far projected the plan is into the future, and how much the plan guides our cities. So another thing that surprised me is how the project grew my skills for future research, interviewing, networking, and a glimpse into local to state government operations. And it also gives me an opportunity and a look into a career path that I could take. So something my community and I can do is that we can be more active in the next comprehensive planning process. And another thing we can do is become more involved in getting to know each other within a community. So this project has helped change my view towards the comprehensive planning process by showing me how my community evolves and how local government shapes it. Also, it shows how my community can be an important part of the planning process. So thank you for giving me your time and everything else.
Great. Questions and comments for Mr. Yang? Yes, Councilmember Vento.
I had the privilege of meeting Mr. Yang during the summer, and I was blown away at that meeting by his wisdom. And I have to say, after 44 years of work experience and a few years prior to that of college, I don't think I would have had the confidence or the depth to get up and give the kind of presentation you did tonight, Jake. I just commend you, and I think we already know who will be representing District 11. And Jake's mother is here too. Kudos, Mom.
Yeah, no doubt. I am very nervous right now.
Well, you're doing a great job, and you're not showing any nervousness.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Great. Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Mr. Yang. I have a question for you. Can you hear me? I'm not sure if my mic's on. I have a question for you about your thoughts in terms of access and opportunity to housing for people who are homeless. Do you see that as a right or a privilege?
I believe it should be a right, but I can see how it can be a privilege too. People do need to work towards getting it, but I think it's hard for people to work towards getting it. They don't have a foothold to step up and try to get sustainability and create that opportunity to get homes and access to everything else. So I think that by doing these tiny homes, they're more cheaper and affordable, and they're kind of just more, it gives people more hope and to get a foothold to get more accessibility and a step up and I guess do what they want instead of not knowing what will be next.
Madam Chair, thank you. I think what I have learned, and I hope what we have learned, is that we can learn a lot by listening to our youth and getting fresh and new and creative ideas. So thank you, and thanks to all the other presenters today.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you. Great presentation. And again, back to the comprehensive plan and also the gentrification piece. So it's always about when new people are coming into the community, whoever they may be, right? Those people, us, them. And so with comprehensive planning, in my experience over 20 years, I think the plan itself and getting people engaged is one thing, but then there are amendments to the plan or development comes forward based on the plan. And that's where the rubber hits the road. And, I think it was back in 1999, the League of Minnesota Cities was really working kind of on a project that they were spearheading, and it was right about at the time where I had teenagers and young kids, and I helped establish a youth council. Actually, it wasn't me. The youth in our community were coming forward, and we established a youth council. So tonight is just feels so good because time went on and it fell by the wayside after many years. And I wish more units of government would embrace a youth council. And I really mean that in a way that it's not set aside in its own thing, but that the work is immersed and brought into the daily work of City Hall or Met Council or the legislature, the White House, whatever it might be. Because I will tell you, you guys are really inspiring tonight, and you help, I think, policymakers like us be more courageous, because I think where we were going earlier is we're helping to shape policy that you are going to inherit. We will not inherit. We inherited something from someone else. We always have to keep that in mind. So I guess I would just say too, and we've got great internship programs here, but I would hope that we as a Met Council, also to the first point, let's not forget the work that they've done and somehow stay connected with you over the years and try to figure out a way where we can do this more often and maybe again incent or figure out a project or a way to make a best practice, an example of some of this where local units of government could take it up too. I think we would have a lot better results when it comes to the things that are really going to matter. So I just commend you and everybody tonight. I got to participate in this as well. And my takeaway was like, oh my God, we're in good hands. It's going to be okay. But it's always about passing the baton forward and making sure that everybody does have a place at the table. So thank you.
Councilmember Lilligan.
Oh, thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair, and Mr. Yang, Jake. I'm really intrigued, but there's a lot of work going on right now around homelessness, unsheltered homelessness. There's a really interesting effort to regionalize this issue, and then for every unit of government within the region to determine how to best use their resources, to leverage them, work collaboratively, and then work outside of government within the private sector with both corporate and philanthropy. And I think the big underappreciated and under-leveraged community partner is the faith community, the churches, as you say. And so I'm really curious as to how you found your way to that determination to really focus on the churches as a resource. So how did you do that? How did you figure that out?
Big shout out to Jess here. He helped me connect with Tom and Tom Fisher with the U of M.
Sure.
And we talked about how the church's land, about our local law and how the church land could be used for the tiny homes like it's already being used right now at Woodland Hills Church, like right down the street from my house, which is pretty crazy.
Did you know that before?
No, I've never heard of that before.
Right.
I didn't know it existed.
Yeah.
I think I've seen it once now when I actually pay attention to it.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Thanks.
Any other? Yes, Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank Pahua and the U of M and the other stakeholder partners. This is a really amazing work that you're doing for the current leaders, the young leaders today. In 2004 and 2005, about 16, 17 years ago, my last 2 years of high school, then State Senator Steve Kelly was the chair of the Senate Education Committee, and he wanted to uplift youth voices, and he created a youth advisory council of the Senate Education Committee. And I was appointed as a high school representative from Humboldt. And It was a life-changing experience for me to be able to be at the table and to have my voice be heard and be a part of the process. If you remember that those 2 years, we were debating new high school science and math standards. And being a part of that process really helped me open my eyes to the importance of government work, policy work. And if there are a few things in my life that I could look back to and say that helped my life trajectory to be a Met Council member today, that would be one of those experiences. And so the work that PAHOA and the Citizens League and the U of M is doing, fostering the leadership of these young leaders is really important. And I hope that in the next couple of years, you bright young leaders will be trading spaces with us up here. So thank you.
Any other comments? My question then, what did you learn about yourself?
I'd say it's a combination of what everyone said, just managing time, networking, especially just reaching out to people. I think a big part was probably a little bit of rejection. People didn't respond. Uh, yeah, just kind of understanding more about just life in general and just how government works.
Mhm. Okay. I think, I've been just jotting some notes as each of you were talking, and most of them have been said, but your energy, your creativity, your enthusiasm, the depth of your knowledge. I mean, all of you have other things that you could have been doing, but you chose to really dive into your studies and doing these projects, which is just unbelievable. And I will say that the poise that each of you has shown is incredible. This is not easy to present to, and we realize that, or any other group, organization, body that you're presenting to. That's extraordinary. So I hope that you all realize that it's a really big deal, and we recognize that, and thank you for that. I hope that all of you have plans to take your skills and think about a career path, because clearly you have the skills and the knowledge that any community, this is your world, these are your communities, and you can reach out now to your whatever community is of interest to you or where you live and see if they have a spot where you could fit in, because what you bring to the table is really a gift to the organization, and every municipality is looking to engage youth for this very reason, what you have brought to us tonight. And we are a better council for each of your presentations, and we thank you for that. It's just really, really a very important thing for us to hear, so we thank you. I have a couple of questions on the program. Thank you. Thank you so much for, this must have been incredible for you as well, and for all of the stakeholders to be a part of, because it's.
Madam Chair, it was, and members of the council, we often hear about how young people, there's apathy, that young people are not interested in getting involved. And I think what you heard tonight is that you've given a platform and given a space and given support, and for all of us to share our social capital and helping open those doors so that they can meet people they otherwise wouldn't get to meet, and giving over our brand of our organization and giving them that calling card to do that work that they're willing to put in the time. I think you've heard from the young leaders today that yes, this was a paid position. At the Citizens League, we believe in paid internships and paid fellowships, and so, but that wasn't the draw. And so I think what we learned at the Citizens League is that this group led us. We did not leave this group. So they, you could see they're very spirited, they're very determined, and we were just lucky to get to work with them. I'll stand for questions, but I would love to give some final remarks too.
Might this be repeated?
I would love to. So that is one reason why we delivered a similar final report. to the McKnight Foundation, who is a funder of this project, at their offices. We like to think it went over just as well with them as it sounds like it went over with you. We saw this as a pilot. At the Citizens League, we have a mission that says we want to champion the role of all Minnesotans to be part of policymaking. And I'm new to the ED role at the Citizens League, and I've been honing in on when we say Minnesotans, who do we mean? And I think that the Citizens League has a great brand name and a brand trust, but it often is known to insiders, to folks who are familiar with the policy world and politics. And this was an experiment. Could we get young people engaged in their local government, their regional government? And I think we've proven that, yes, if given the time and support, we can do that. So I would love to repeat this project. I think there's many ways to expand and build on it. We often hear about the urban-rural divide. So there's a part of me that would love to expand the reach beyond the Met Council district. What would that look like? And using the experience of these young leaders here to actually act as a mentor for the next cohort.
Thank you. And please, your concluding remarks.
Yeah. So, Madam Chair Cummings and Met Council members, I just want to thank you again. When you invite us to spaces like this and invite the young leaders to spaces like this, you are sending out a signal that their voice matters. And so I really want to thank you for your time. And I want to thank these friends over here, Kristen and Matt, for yielding your time to us tonight so that all the leaders' voices could be heard. I want to express a special thank you to Mary Bogie, who's here, and Lisa Barajas, who is not here. These two came and met with all 10 of our young leaders and had a half an hour presentation on the agenda, but stayed for 2. And so part of that was because the young leaders had so many questions, and they were so patient with all of us in answering each and every one. So I want to thank you, Mary, and please extend that thank you to Lisa. I also want to thank our partners I mentioned before, of course, the McKnight Foundation, and all the young leaders. 5 are here tonight, 5 are not here. Their final report is in the packet. Like all Citizens League reports, the final report will end up on our website. So should you want to revisit it at some point, just know that there'll be an easy Google search on our site. I think that is all my comments. And I wrote it down here to make sure I didn't forget anything. Jake mentioned in his presentation about the ability to weather through some rejection. They were very polite tonight, as I suppose they should be in a chamber like this. But in seeking out meetings, they were not always treated seriously, even with the Citizens League calling card and even with some emails ahead of time from staff. And so I think you heard tonight the seriousness with which they are approaching this work. And so as you move forward in your work, as young people approach you, I hope that you welcome them with the same openness that you've welcomed us here tonight. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And please extend to the 5 who are not here tonight also that any of us, I'm sure, would be open to having conversations, and we're interested in looking more in depth at their projects and so forth. And I hope that this was the beginning of a conversation and that we can find ways to continue to meld together and move forward, because this was really a wonderful night. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great.
Well done.
The next item on our agenda, of course, was the presentation on community development research and place-based equity, which fits into, of course, all of the work we're doing and is huge. And thank you both so much for ceding your time to the youth. I think that all of us are amazed and awed by what we got out of it, but really appreciate your patience with this and look forward to giving you your full due of time. And we'll sit down and figure out an agenda, a time to put you on the agenda, and look forward to your presentation as well. So thank you so much for that.
Sure.
And then with that, Councilmember
Sure, thank you.
Hudson.
So I was under the impression we were gonna have like 8 more presentations coming as opposed to the like 3 or 4 more that we got. So I just want to be, I thought as a courtesy, you know, if we might be here until 7 o'clock and then they wouldn't even get to present. So they're still here. I mean, if other council members want to hear that presentation, I didn't mean to shut that down, I guess is what I'm saying. So.
Yeah, it's a lengthy presentation. And again, we want to make sure that we're all fully present, and that means we need to have had dinner if we're going to stay for another hour plus. So I think really out of respect for you, since you have been willing to change that, but thank you for that. So any other business here? Yes, Councilmember.
Just a
Wallace.
quick comment because going back to the youth participation at the Equity Advisory Committee, we have discussed the idea of organizing a new next generation advisory committee.
Oh.
Just for young people. So that's a discussion that would be happening at the EAC level and perhaps be elevated here. So just that this seems to fit and bolster our idea of having a separate committee that will address issues from the youth point of view. So
Great, thank
stay
you for that.
tuned.
Thank you for that. Anything else?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Councilmember Vento.
Madam Chair, and Mary, given that the McKnight Foundation is really zeroing in on climate change and environmental sustainability and equity, would it be appropriate for us to have a letter from the Met Council commending them for the support they gave the Citizens League and this youth leaders, young leaders program? If there's going to be another grant request, I think our voice and just talking about how excellent this was and how much we gained from it might be beneficial. So just a thought.
Madam Chair and council members, I think that's a great idea.
I'd move that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
And just
Councilmember.
one last detail, we do have recommendations that have been presented to us. So, I don't know how that works and we get that back into staff and through our committees, but it would really be great if we could take those in and seriously look at what could be possible, not just probable, and report back as well on some of the things that we are able to implement or schedule into the work that we're doing. I think that would be so awesome if we could do that.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
A lot of them are going to fit into our 3 goals.
I know.
I mean, just perfectly.
Anything else? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.